Robert-Falcon Ouellette is an educator, a musician, a researcher, was a member of the Canadian Navy. Now he's a warrant officer in the Army Reserves, and he was a Liberal MP from the province of Manitoba. Defeated in the last election. But first I have to ask you, welcome. It's good to see you, because we had occasion to run into each other at all sorts of events. And I always found you to be very open-minded and very willing to embrace ideas from all sorts of quarters. I'm wondering if that was a strength or a liability in politics.
Some days it was a strength, and certainly it was a liability. That is for sure. Because often in politics, the party structure really wants you to conform, and your colleagues want you to conform. So that's kind of, it was always kind of a friction point in Ottawa for me. But, being a university professor and a bit of a free thinker, I think it's important, though, to have people in the Westminster parliamentary system kind of push different ideas. They have people in government, and I mean the executive branch, who do those other types of things, but you also need people in Parliament who are willing to kind of be a counterbalance, to test ideas, to challenge what is being put forward or what's being done in society. And because if you don't challenge anything, it never changes, and it kind of keeps going on the same old way that we've been doing things for a long time. And sometimes those things don't work.
Exactly. I always felt this as a journalist, and I feel it more now, which is we don't allow people to change their minds. If somebody changes their mind on an issue, we go, oh my God, a 180, a 360. Oh, he's, reversed his entire position. This is terrible. When in fact, we should be encouraging people based on new information, new perspectives, new ideas to say, I've had a change of heart here. It's
or even,
really...
even sometimes to say, I don't know.
Right. That would be the most important thing, to be able to answer a question that way. So do you miss the Ottawa political scene?
Of course, I miss it. I miss being able to influence policy to improve the lives of the people where I was representing. I'm actually quite proud about the work I was able to do. I wasn't able to do everything, because there's only so many hours in a day, and I discovered a maximum limit. Like I was working 100 plus hours a week, 120 sometimes. By the end, I was exhausted, but the bags under my bags, you could see the pouches going, and I was looking a little haggard and old. But I actually felt if you can actually make a difference. Like I wouldn't, I know that I was talking to some colleagues and they felt that they weren't making a difference, that they were kind of like, why am I here? And some of them left after their first term. They said, I've pitched it, and I'm not really interested by this lifestyle. But I actually really think that politicians, if you get, if you push, and you pull and you work with people as well and listen to different ideas, you can kind of get the change you want. And, examples of that, it's like the indigenous languages in the House of Commons. Like, it took, a challenge, a point of order, and then, a study by the Procedure and Rules Committee, and then a report. And then finally the House, after 2 years, adopts rules, changes the ecosystem of the House of Commons, and gets unanimous consent from all the parties to allow translation of indigenous languages, which gives an advantage to politically to certain people in the House to be able to communicate a different message politically. And people gave up some of their power, but that took, also working with different people and trying to push and to be kind and to be gentle. You said, I like to listen to different ideas, of course, because if you don't hear someone's perspective, you're not going to be able to work together.
I think most people that come to Ottawa as members of Parliament or senators even come on a mission. They do believe they can make change. They do believe that the system ultimately works despite its frustrations. Do you still think that?
Yes, 100%. But I also believe that there are many MPs that actually feel that they have no personal power in that system, that they are not listened to, that they are not thought of highly by the power structures of people who are in position of higher authority. And, it's unfortunate, but then, the question is, your people who are, do you accept that, or do you continue to find ways to maneuver, your ideas, the ideas from your citizens forward in that environment? And, some people have been very successful at it, like Michael Chong, the Democratic Farm Bill. Others, their bills die and never get debated on the floor at all. So it's quite a difficult thing.
The whole theory of, as Pierre Elliott Trudeau said, the backbencher is a nobody when you're 100 feet off Parliament Hill. That is, however, unfortunately, still true. As far as the power system in Ottawa sees it, perhaps
but
not
you
the
can make them
constituents.
nervous. You can make your power structures nervous. It's good a little, like, to keep people on edge a little bit. You don't want to do it, like, obviously, we have parties and everyone's supposed to be working together, and you don't want to vote against your own party all the time. But you can hold your own side to account and make them think about a position they're about to take and how that might translate in how you vote. But if you always give in every time, then you're a pushover. Don't be a pushover. Stand up for yourself. Stand up, rise up. Don't accept the status quo if you're unhappy with it.
I agree with that, but do you think it also led to your demise? You lost the last election. Is that because the party didn't come out for you? Is that because voters were sending a message?
The party is the problem is the riding is like a NDP stronghold,
right?
And never been lost to the NDP except for the time I arrived, and I still had the vote up. I was 35. I was 37%, and so I was usually in every election we're getting around 11%. And I had it up to 55 and then down to 37. So I was still doing quite well. I think people appreciated in the riding, but then end of the day, also the party structure is so strong. The government had their own challenges during the election with some major political gaffes that were going on throughout the campaign. And I think that did not translate well on the ground for people saying, who am I going to vote for?
Well, how do you deal with that? I've never sat where you sit as an elected member of parliament, but you guys look around and see the weed charity scandal and giving, all of that. Like, what do you do? Do you have in your caucus, does anybody stand up and say, what the hell are you guys doing? Or do you just keep it to yourself?
There are people that stand up for sure. But I also think people put their hand on their forehead and they kind of go, this is unfortunate. They wonder what sometimes people are thinking. We ask that, people do, that people, when they consider different perspectives on a political issue, but also how it might look in the public and what's going on. And I think, but actually overall, I'm going to have to be honest, I think people are actually quite good. Even when you challenge authority, I don't think anyone's, bad people in Ottawa. One of the Prime Minister's offices are bad. I think they're actually good people who are doing good things, and they have to make a decision. And it's always about that, you've got the cover and you just need to pull it a little bit closer to your side to represent your people a little bit more, to make sure your issue or the people you represent are looked after, are considered in the final decision. And I think that is, what happens. There are stuff you can control and stuff you cannot control. Like right now, like if I was thinking about, like, we're looking at the pandemic, as an MP, like, there's not a lot a member of parliament can do except for standing up in the House of Commons as the opposition and shaking your fist. The government's not doing this or this or this. But I actually think that's perhaps not maybe the role of, second guessing the executive in a pandemic, in a major crisis. What the parliamentary system should be doing right now is planning for the future. What is post-pandemic? All these MPs in every committee, there's over 30 committees, and in the Senate as well, everyone should be sitting down and planning a foresight exercise. What do we want Canada to look like in 5, 10 years? What will it look like? What will the international order look like? What will finance look like? What will the healthcare system look like? How are these going to change? How do we plan for that future? And doing those studies today, not when we're post-pandemic. And
but
that's the
Robert, I agree with you 1,000%, except no government wants that committee to sit and be critical while they're in the middle of it. No government wants the...
It's actually, I don't think it's actually about criticism right now about what the government's doing. I'm actually talking about, like, when all the jobs are gone, when the pandemic is over, everyone's been vaccinated in a year and a half, hopefully, and the pandemic is done, and we're trying to get back to business. What type of infrastructure are we going to build? Where is that infrastructure going to come from? Where is the technology? Is it going to come from China? Are we going to build manufacturing here in Canada ourselves? What are the jobs that people are going to be doing? What's the healthcare system going to be looking like in the long term? What were the failings? But also, what do we actually want in this extreme long term? What do we expect Canada to look like in 5 and 10 years? And you can be doing this on the international scene, the national defense, and it's not even criticizing the government about today. It's actually really looking to the future about what Canada might actually look like.
And you know better than most that governments have 4-year attention spans because they're trying to get elected next time. They don't want to have that conversation. They're going to throw out theories about infrastructure and restructuring the healthcare system, but nowhere is that conversation seriously being allowed to happen in Ottawa, in this country today. I think some of the business groups on the exterior are having those conversations in webinars and in Zoom meetings and all of that, but there is no focal point for that.
No, but I think that's the role of the MP, and I think if you don't have to make it a partisan issue.
Exactly.
Like I did with Doug Olson on the health committee, we did a study on the meth crisis and the opioid crisis across. And, we discovered that there are problems in the healthcare system. We discovered that, Stats Canada and Health Canada don't really work together, don't keep statistics, don't have central database with all this information about drug use and what's going on. So we're making policy decisions kind of a little bit blindly and in the dark. And the government said, those are good recommendations. We're working towards, the deputy minister said, we're now working towards setting up a data sharing center on health statistics in order to be able to fill that need. That's kind of the work, but it's nonpartisan. It's not stuff that I actually believe the government's I don't think the government's, maybe perhaps 10 years ago they might care under Stephen Harper, but I don't really think, the government today would be too upset if MPs were going out and studying, what's the world going to look like in 2 years? What should our policy be towards China in 2 years' time?
But we have to answer that question now. That's my point. That if you try to have any of those discussions today in order to plan the path for 5 years down, it becomes, the government implicitly sees that as a criticism of them. It's dismissed as the rantings of the opposition, and it doesn't matter which party is where. The same thing occurs. It is very hard to have long-term thinking in government that isn't considered or seen as a political attack.
But even actually government, if to be honest, is actually very good at crisis management. It doesn't matter what government it is, when the crisis happens, everyone's eyes turn towards the problem for the day, for the week, for the news cycle. And it is a very short-term way of doing things. And then, there's the hope that the civil servants and others are taking care of the long-term issues. And sometimes they are, and sometimes they aren't.
They're not.
But, we should be thinking about that. And I just, there are huge challenges that we're going to face as a society, even related to the environment and how this is all going to work out. Like right now, for the next year and a half, no one's going to talk about any of these things because we're focused on survival. The mental health problems and all the deaths and the deaths of many seniors. I don't know if you've seen your Facebook feed in a while, but every day people who are dying, not from COVID, from other issues, but
that are being ignored.
they're being ignored, but
Mhm.
it's sad, you put down my condolences, but a lot of people are passing away, and there's going to be a lot of trauma related to that. How are we going to deal with that? How are we dealing with it today? That so we're focused a lot on that, but I really think Parliament should be, someone should be looking
Yeah.
to the future. Maybe the Senate should be looking to the future, because you're a little less partisan.
Yes, we're trying, believe me. We can't get committees up and running either. I want to ask you about a couple of other things, and you're sitting there in Winnipeg as we talk today,
Oh,
which has the worst numbers in the country right now. What does it feel like from where you sit? Do you feel like you're in the middle of a pandemic crisis? Are you locked in your house? Are you functioning? What's your life like?
we are locked in our houses. Yeah. You go out for some groceries, but the groceries are, you know, rather restrained, only 25% capacity.
Mhm.
You can't go to restaurants. You can't go visit friends anymore. You can only really go for a walk and kind of watch a film and try and do some work at home. Uh, but, I think it's actually very worrying. And I think people are actually quite upset, to be honest, here in Manitoba. We saw what happened in the springtime in Ontario and Quebec with the seniors' homes. And we watched the numbers, and our numbers were extremely flat. They were just kind of going across, like almost a few cases. And then, we didn't have anything. We tried to open up the economy and had people coming from outside into the province, a lot of internal travel in the West. And it's come back to bite us. We're paying the price today. We have senior homes where we had ambulances outside. I had a friend, her father was in a senior's home, and he was not being cared for. There was no staff on the floor at one point. She had gotten permission to be there as a volunteer. She was self-isolating every night in a hotel room in order to go in to look after him. And she ended up looking out for other people, seniors who only speak sometimes, forgot a little bit of their English and, were only able to communicate in Portuguese. They immigrated to Canada 60 years ago, worked their whole lives, and no one was there to even give them water or change their diapers. Her father was lying on the floor for 6 hours when she found him. This is going on in our country, and I think people are really upset about it. They're upset with the government. They're upset that we have no contact tracing in Manitoba, or it's not very well done.
That's my issue. I go back to Saskatchewan and I get a test and I get a result 6-7 days later. It doesn't help, right? There's some basic things that don't seem to be working in one of the wealthiest G7 countries in the world, and we can't deliver the basics.
Yeah, it seems to be a lot of patchwork that's going on. So everyone's doing their own little thing and not very much central coordination, but that's how our federation works. And people don't like their toes being tread on either by the central federal government. No one wants to be, the West, Kenny, Mo, and Pallister don't want to be told by Trudeau what they should be doing. But at the end of the day, we have to work together. And, this is part of the problem. Manitoba right now has the worst cases of COVID in North America.
Even Anthony Fauci is worried.
Fauci is worried. I think we're going to forget about Christmas. To be honest, I was able to go out and do my shopping, a little bit early. I planned out in September to go out and pick up some gifts for the kids while they were on sale and, get some stuff. And I think everyone else, it's too bad. You're not going to be able to do it. And, it's not so bad for the people who can order from Amazon, but, if you're a very low income worker, it's going to be a tight Christmas for a lot of people.
Well, and you're also not supporting your local guys if you're buying everything on Amazon. We want to go and support the local business people, but you can't get there.
No, all the local businesses are shut down here in Manitoba. It's all, the only thing open is essential services. And, Walmart is an essential service because they have a grocery store, so they're lucky. Yeah. But they also sell other stuff, so maybe people can go in there. It's kind of packed, and this is going to get worse because we're going to be indoors for the winter.
I was looking interestingly at a move by the Premier to actually enforce, because that's part of what I'm thinking. I mean, if you've got 200 people gathered in a bar drinking and not masking, go in and find them, shut the place down. We seem to not be sending strong enough messages. So the Premier has now hired some private security to enforce laws, and people are reacting to it, going, whoa, maybe we shouldn't be doing that. Like, they can't seem to win for losing.
Well, I think it's a good idea what they're doing. Frankly, I think, like, even we had Thanksgiving, and we all knew the cases. You could predict the cases were going to explode, and they did explode right afterwards, because families were getting together. It just takes one person who's infected, and they infect 12, 13, 20 other people. My Thanksgiving was held outdoors in a socially distanced way. It was freezing cold. Everyone had jackets on, and the turkey came up baking hot. And, at some point, Granddad said, can we go indoors? And I said, well, maybe it's time to go home. And, we spent some time together. We enjoyed ourselves outdoors, and, good to see you.
Yeah. No, it is going to be.
I get to enjoy. He's not sick, and I get to enjoy his conversation by telephone for another few years.
So at least it's something.
It's always a trade-off.
Yeah. I want to ask you about some other issues because I think you're continuing these causes. You were explaining that you used to be part of the Royal Canadian Navy, and you were part of the Naval Reserve, but you've switched over to the Army now, where you've attained status as a warrant officer. What drives that part of you? Where'd that come from?
Well, that was when I was a kid. My grandfather was in the Merchant Marine. He joined when he was 16 during the Second World War, sailed the convoys through the Battle of the Atlantic, was torpedoed, I believe, 2 or 3 times into the dark waters of the North Atlantic, plucked out and survived. And so I joined Sea Cadets and Navy League Cadets. Actually, I've worn a uniform since I've been 10 years old. And then, into the cadet movement, and then into the Naval Reserves, into the regular forces with the 22nd Regiment, into the medical field for a few years during the war in Afghanistan. And then I joined back into the Naval Reserves and, became a prof at the U of M. But I always it's something you just can't get out of your blood. At one point, it was kind of a little bit difficult to combine the life of an MP with that of going down once a week on an evening to serve in the Naval Reserves. And they asked me, well, maybe you want to consider leaving. I said, I've been wearing this uniform since I'm 10. I'm going all the way until I'm literally kicked out at age 60. So I've got a few more years in me left.
Good. I will say thank you for your service, because when I was in Afghanistan, we saw a lot of people that came up from the reserve. They were teachers, they were doctors, lawyers, the whole thing. And they went and served in Afghanistan, guys who hadn't really been in uniform, certainly not in a combat situation, for a very long time. So it's much appreciated when people step up and do that.
Well, I think it's a fun thing. Like, there are great people, great men, great women, some good camaraderie. It's a change of pace. A month ago, I was out on the firing range shooting my semi-automatic rifle. I passed, so that was good. I was a little out of shape on what I was doing, but I did quite well. And you're just trying a different experience, and also I get to talk to a lot of young people, a lot of 19, 20-year-olds, young men, young women, find out their dreams, what it is that they're doing, why are they serving. Some are just trying something out. It was always kind of a dream for themselves to be in the military, and they just want to test it and see if they want to go on, or maybe they'll go do something else. Some are just supporting their families with a job because it's a way of earning a bit of an income to support their life, and the kids that some of them have. And it's pretty cool talking to a lot of the people. I enjoy the social aspect a lot as well.
You're about to turn 44, so you're now the old guy and they're the young guy.
Yes, I am the old man. It's kind of 20 years ago I was the young buck. They used to make fun of me in the Vaduz. They called me Poof.
Because
Because I was so young. I was actually one of the youngest sergeants. I was 22 and I was a sergeant, and we had the big bearskin hats, and
Yeah.
there's this fellow, anyways, the old sergeant said, "That's a puff," and I'm going to call you puff because you're so young and so, so colorful, we'll let you,
You've been a lot of places. Now you're the son of an English mother and a Korean Métis father. Your mom was English and Cree?
no, mom, just pure English from
Pure
England.
English. And your dad was Cree,
Almost came
Métis.
off the boat, but she came off the plane.
Yeah, she came off the plane. Your father was from Red Pheasant First Nation, that's near North Battleford. And you were primarily raised by your mother, and you seem to end up in an awful lot of places, including an elite private school. Your mom somehow got a loan to get you in there. She must have been a creative woman.
I think she was actually a little insane. She's not alive anymore, but I will say, in a loving way, she was kind of crazy. I was in a grade 7 and I was failing out of my classes. I wasn't doing very well. I was getting in fights. We had some gang activity. I had to have, you'd have to defend yourself in the hallways after school. And I think she saw, I was in cadets, and she saw a potential in me, and she kind of saw this ad in the newspaper, the Calgary Herald, and it said, Strathcona Tweedsmuir, private school, K to 12. And so she's like, or 1 to 12, accepting students and applications. So she rounded up $60, took me down, and I took all the tests, and, and I remember actually the night before, we went to Kmart to get some clothes, and I got a nice dress shirt with the collar, and it was cotton actually from Egypt, and a tie, and I got some hammer pants, gray MC Hammer pants. They were kind of the puffy around the bottom. I got some Air Jordans because my mom had borrowed some cash from my grandmother, and we filled up the car with that cash, and we drove up to the school. It's on an estate in the south end of the city, and with its own little lake. And we get out there, I take the tests, and I did my very best, and I had a teacher kind of coach me how to take a multiple choice test, and during the interview, my mom out there on the way out, she said, if anyone asks you questions, can you speak clearly? And I was like, oh, no, you stop, you can't mumble. You can't mumble, Robert. Whoa. Okay, Mom, I won't mumble. Can you say yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am? Yes, ma'am, I will speak and enunciate clearly. Thank you. And then I went back to being my sullen self. But, I was in the interview, and, they said, oh, we see you, the head of the department, it was Mr. Walls, actually said, we see that you're, you like to play a trumpet, and I was taking band class. Everyone was forced to take band class. And I said, yes, sir, I love to play the trumpet. And good. We're starting a band program next year. We could have you play in that band program to help get it started. You'll have some experience, and you can help coach the younger children. The other youth. Oh, yes, sir. Of course, sir. I love playing the trumpet. Oh, and you're cadets. And so anyways, they ended up sending an acceptance letter to me. And I said, Mom, how are you going to afford this? It was about, at the time, I think about $14,000 a year, which is about $25,000 today in today's funds. And my mom said, well, I'll figure it out. She went to the bank and she tried to get a loan from the first CIBC, and they said no. And so then she went to her employer. She was in a kind of a minimum wage job and doing some secretarial work. And the employer said, I'll give you an employment letter. And my mom said, can you put down I make $50,000? And he said, well, okay, but what does this mean for me? And my mom said, well, you don't have to pay back the loan. You're just, for the moment, this is what I earn. And they said, okay, you're a good employee. I'll put that down. Thank you very much, Sharon. Good luck. My mom went to the bank. She dressed up, as Oprah Winfrey said, dress for success. Oh, you have to dress for success. And I showed up, or she showed up at the bank, and the bank manager looked at the she had no debts. So she looked at the employment letter. Of course, Mrs. Ouellette, we'd love to give you a loan. Education is an excellent investment for your son. Here is the money, so we were able to pay the first installments, and she kept going like that. And I'll tell you something, she didn't steal the money. She paid back every single to that bank. She scrimped and saved for years, even after I was out of Strathcona and I graduated. And I owe her a debt of gratitude.
You're one lucky person. That's all I can say, that you had a mother like that.
Meet some of the greatest people who kind of, and it was actually the self-awareness, because I kind of didn't really believe in myself. And, I remember they were going down the list of people getting marks and Lawrence Barantz, 93%, Sonia Lowe, 92%. Robert, 89%, you're third in the class, congratulations. And they go all the way down, Mr. Wilson in social studies, giving everyone's mark, announcing it out. And, I was doing better than the other students who were, the sons and daughters of consul generals from India and England, and the sons and daughters of oil executives. I could compete with the best. And I was like, wow, I could do this. I'm not so bad. And so I really started studying and thinking about my future, and it kind of pushed me to get a couple masters.
You ended up with a bachelor's degree from the University of Calgary in music, 3 diplomas from Laval University, master's degrees in music and education, and a PhD in anthropology. Is that about right?
Yes. All in French. Laval is a French university, only French.
And then of course, we've talked about the military issues. We've talked about being a member of Parliament, very active on Aboriginal, on Indigenous issues. That's also something that drives you.
Yes, I think life is too short, and I think I want to make a difference in this world. I think I have the opportunity to help make a difference. And so right now I'm working with the Yellow Quill College, which is this very small post-secondary institution, the only Indigenous controlled post-secondary institution in the province of Manitoba. And we're trying to make it into a university. So we're developing a Bachelor of Education program now for up north for teachers in communities, because some communities actually have no teachers. They might only have educational assistants teaching in the classrooms, with maybe one teacher in the entire school supervising a lot of EAs. And so we're trying to create a Bachelor of Education geared towards them, people who are EAs, to get them, the not necessary methods and knowledge to be able to, inspire kids to learn, to get the education levels up for a lot of our communities. And so that's kind of what I'm working on right now. It's fun, it's interesting, and it's going to be important.
Can you tell me what reconciliation means?
Reconciliation is, I think, being able to listen to each other, but also being able to give space to each other. And I think reconciliation, doesn't just go one way. I think it has to go both ways. I think people have to be able to listen on both sides of an issue. But principally also, I think, mainly non-Indigenous peoples need to listen in this case. But I also think people need to listen as well. And I think we need
I agree with that. And we've got one sort of big issue, and I know you have thoughts on this because you dealt with it in the parliamentary context, but UNDRIP, and I'll just explain that for people who don't live in this world, the United Nations resolution on the rights of Indigenous people. And there's a huge debate in this country. I mean, the UN has passed it, the province of British Columbia, everybody says, oh, this is wonderful. We're going to recognize and respect Native people, and we're going to change our citizenship oath so that we ask newcomers to the country to agree to respect your traditions and your history in this country. Can we make it a law?
Well, I think the intent was to have it passed as a law, where if there was a government piece of legislation that might contradict it, that the government would have the moral obligation to go about changing those laws. But this is the act that was actually before Parliament in the last Parliament was a private member's bill. it has importance, but I think at the end of the day, it actually comes down to, the people who are in charge and who's in power and how they view this relationship.
But can you use laws to, I have two sets of questions. One is, can you legally bind people to be more open-minded and respect the Aboriginal culture, the indigenous part of our world? And secondly, can you make the rest of the laws in this country subject to that?
Well, I'm going to come to a story. So if you think about the Canadian Forces, when I joined the Canadian Armed Forces back in '96, we had major issues after Somalia. We had major issues surrounding human rights, how people were treated in the military. I remember on my basic training, it kind of overnight, one day they were able to swear at us and physically manhandle us, to the next day they were allowed to touch us and not allowed to rip parts of our uniform off. That's a major change that went on halfway through my basic training course in '96, 30 Bravo. Down in Saint Jean-sur-Richelieu at the Mega, the base there. And but we knew back then about harassment. We knew back then about sexual harassment in the military, and we were told. We had something called SHARP training, and we were told not to do it. And it's a command and control structure where people have to go through training and are mandated by law, by regulation, in certain ways to act. And, still today, we're dealing with it in the military. So that's 24, 22 years later, and we're still having the same issues. So legislation will not change people's mentality, but it can, over time, modify the environment about what is acceptable to say, and it can set up opportunities for conversation. So legislation is important. Because at the end of the day, if it's passed by Parliament, that's the most important and symbolic place of Canadian democracy, where things are hopefully debated and discussed, and there's pushback back and forth on an issue. And if you come back to UNDRIP, the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, enshrining it in law, it's important because it sends a clear message to deputy ministers and people in the Justice Department and other departments. When we are writing legislation or regulations or interpreting regulations, how should we be doing this when we're working together?
I get that part of it. The thing that has raised a lot of questions, particularly for constitutional experts, is what does veto and consent mean? If there are laws coming forward, who gets to say that's not acceptable? Can we put that in the hands of one group?
That is an interesting question, and I don't have the answer to it.
Yeah, none of us do. I think that's
it's a very good question. I know the government says that that's not what would happen. That it's the courts have been very clear that consent does not mean a veto. That projects in the national interest can still move forward. Whether the courts would modify those rulings over time is another question. Whether it's in the long-term interests of Canada, that is also a good question. But I think at the end of the day, you do need Indigenous peoples in Canadian society working together. We need to be finding ways of developing resources together, creating wealth and jobs together. And I think, for instance, what's going on with the XL pipeline is a good thing. Right now, there's Indigenous groups that are buying into the pipeline, becoming part owners. And I think this is like an excellent long-term development, because it shows now we have, instead of one group taking all the resources and then bringing them to Toronto or Montreal or the southern end of the country, the resources are then spread more evenly around, and giving more opportunity to people to be employed and to have a better quality of life around this country. So those are good developments. Now,
I couldn't agree more on that. I'd like to see more ownership, and we had a conversation with Delbert Wapass on this very issue, which is make us part of the economy, not either the recipients of or excluded from.
But I also think, like, if you think about Indigenous peoples, I think they have a right to also manage, look after, run their own affairs. They have a right to their own government. Indigenous peoples don't need people coming in and running their education system and telling them, what language they should be speaking. People in community are going to know, we are going to need English, but we also want to know our own language. We want to be able to teach our own history, but we also want our children to be able to function in mainstream society and be successful at it as well. But, if we have people from outside who are coming in and saying, oh, this is the education system that you need to set up, and this is what you need to do, and this is how you're going to do it, I don't think it works very well, because we've been doing that for 150 years, and, we're still arguing about it. Mm-hmm. And, and that's part of what UNDRIP is also about. I know people are stuck up about the veto thing, but there are so many other things about, children and basic, water rights and just, the way that governments are able to set up and run their own affairs within UNDRIP. It's just basic human rights. It's actually a human rights document. If it's interesting, if we followed the Canadian Constitution and, our declaration, our Bill of Rights, human rights that we have here in Canada, we probably wouldn't need to have UNDRIP. Mm-hmm. We probably wouldn't have the Indian Act. I don't know if you know this, but the Indian Act for a long time, or the Canadian Bill of Rights was not applicable on reserve until 10 years.
Yeah, I understand.
And you were part of that, that change in legislation.
Yeah.
That is absolutely insane to think that a piece of the Canadian Constitution had no force of effect on any reserve in Canada, meaning we had no human rights on reserve for over 30 years after the Constitution had been signed into law. Yeah. It's insane to think that's what it.
No, we got a long road to hoe here, and I'm very glad that you've decided to stay on it in one way or another. I don't know, you ever going to run again?
There's a strong possibility. You can't get it. I'm going to, you're actually at you get a certain point and you have to choose, what do you want to do with your life? And I actually really believe public service is extremely important. And, I meet the people in Ottawa like yourself who are committed to making Canada a better place. And I really think people are actually there for the good reasons. There are a few that are kind of there for their own reasons, self-grandization and some other stuff. But at the end of the day, I really believe people really want to make Canada a better place. You might disagree politically with them. You might want to yell at them.
Absolutely.
But, when you go to those receptions or, you meet each other in the hallways, you can have a good conversation and learn about each other. And I love going to the prayer breakfasts in the morning with some of the conservatives and having chats with them. And I learned all about Mennonites and who they are. And they taught me a lot about Indigenous peoples. And, it was a lot of fun.
No, I've got to say you were a breath of fresh air here. And I hope you do come back. And I hope I'm still here when you do. Okay. And we'll just carry on. We'll make some stuff happen. Okay. Robert, it was really good to talk to you.
Tapwe akikitwam. Tapwe means truth. Akikitwam. Until next time.
That's a wonderful thing to say. We'll see you soon. How about that?
Kitwam.
Robert-Falcon Ouellette was a Liberal MP for a while. May come back, maybe another one. Thanks for joining us again here on No Nonsense. There's a guy who actually gives meaning to that. No nonsense. Just says it the way it is. Good luck. All the best.
Thanks.